Now, I'm not one to play the metas in ARPGs almost ever, but ball lightning is as good as they say it is. And I thought you needed so much more to get this build off the ground, but you can do it much sooner than you think. You just need to get lucky with one legendary aspect. Let's jump into it. Before this, I was playing as a Blizz Sorc, and I had just gotten to level 61 and had all my legendary aspects that were necessary. I even had a level 61 version of Glacial, so I was cruising through like tier 25 nightmare dungeons without a problem. Well, fast forward through seeing all this buzz about the ball lightning build and doing a little bit of research, it turned out I already had the gravitational aspect that I needed for it. So I was like, fuck it, let's give it a shot. And oh my god, when I say this is one of the best builds I've ever played, I mean, this thing will wash your car and walk your dog for you at the end of the day. I mean, with the same gear, I can literally run a 35 to 40 without dying more than once, and I haven't even optimized the rest of my stats yet. The build is definitely mana hungry, so the two things you want to go for almost right away are Recharging and Prodigy, and slap these on your rings if you have the space for it. As most of you know, Prodigy gives you mana back for every cooldown you use, and luckily for this build, your entire bar is cooldowns besides ball lightning, so at the very least, you can get your start here. Ideally, you'd want to have things like resource generation, cooldown reduction, and cost reduction on everything else. And if you can't get a hold of those right away, focus on doing some defensive stats, because while this is some of the craziest damage output I've ever seen, this build folds like a wet paper towel. A couple defensive legendary aspects, for example, would be like Might and Disobedience. And of course, using these will allow you to live longer, giving you more time to dump your lightning balls. Now on to the skills and important passives. Ball lightning is of course going to be your main damaging skill, and then just about everything else is going to be your supporting and defensive cooldowns. And those include things like Frost Nova, Teleport, Frost Shield, Flame Shield, and then for the ult, go with Unstable Currents. In your enchantment slot, you definitely want to have Ball Lightning as one of them, and then you can either use Chain Lightning for mana regen, or Flame Shield for the cheat death if you're prone to dying like I am. And then Protection is one of those passives that's going to make you live a lot longer because it gives you a barrier every time you use a cooldown. In addition to that, another one I want to highlight is Invigorating Conduit, and this gives you mana back every time you pick up a Crackling Orb, so that helps immensely with the mana problem that this build has. Now top this all off with Overflowing as your key passive, as it goes hand in hand with Invigorating Conduit, because every time your crackling energy strikes something, it reduces the cooldown on things like Teleport and Unstable Currents. Now the playstyle on this can be a little bit tricky at first, but it gets easier the more you do it. Because it's so mana hungry, you only have enough to get out maybe 2 or 3 ball lightnings before you have to run around and dodge shit. So you jump in, cast a couple of balls, keep trying to corral all the mobs into a nice little clump somewhere, and while doing so, you gotta cycle through your cooldowns to try and maintain that barrier on your health. Do not just run into packs and then blow every CD in one go. But once you get this down, like I said, it gets easier as time goes on, and then you just repeat the same thing in every single fight. Boss fights, on the other hand, are a lot easier. You can kind of just run in, cast until your heart's content, and of course slurp up all the crackling energy orbs that are around you. There's a few quirks and tips to this one. Like right away, the one thing I want to point out to everybody is that this build is extremely soft. If you stop for even just a second, then this happens. Every time there's like no recourse, you just die. So one of the things I like to do, if you use the stock settings on your mouse and keyboard, if you have ball lightning on your left click, which is also your move button, you can hold that down and then just tap shift every time you want to do a cast. It makes it really easy to continually cast while you're running. And like I said before, you want to be slurping up as much of your crackling orbs as you can. So this is what I've found so far to be the best method of doing so. A few of the endgame items give you a huge benefit and make this build a lot easier, but it doesn't necessarily make it less prone to dying. But these items would be things like Raiment of the Infinite and Godslayer Crown, as both of these help you corral mobs a lot easier. Flicker Step, which gives you wild cooldown reduction every time you evade through mobs. Tibalt's Pants, because these go in tandem with the Metamorphosis Vampiric Power, which is the one that you see people blood warping around. And then of course the newest one to this whole run is Tal Rosh's Iridescent Loop, which gives you a damage modifier for each unique element of damage for 4 seconds at a time. Overall, the build performs extremely well in both AoE and bosses. In fact, I, being the idiot that I am, almost beat Uber Lilith at level 80. But it really is a ton of fun once you get used to it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this season so far. Do me a favor, and if you enjoyed this content, subscribe, maybe leave a comment, and hit the like button. You can also hang out with me live on Twitch and here on YouTube at least once a week, so make sure you're following there. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video, and if you're bored, YouTube recommends this next one for you. Happy grinding, my friends, and we'll see you on the next one.